Silence. A private jet sat alone on a deserted runway long after the rest of the airport had fallen asleep. The engines were cold. Inside, a phone rested untouched on the leather seat beside an expensive watch and a passport that had never been stamped again. There were no signs of violence, no farewell message, no ransom demand, and no witness who could explain what happened next. One of America's wealthiest businessmen had vanished as if he had stepped out of existence. The investigation would stretch across continents, consume millions of dollars, and expose secrets that no one believed could remain hidden for so long. Years later, one forgotten clue would force investigators to question everything they thought they knew. But before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Was he murdered? Did he disappear by choice? Or was someone willing to erase every trace of a man who knew far too much? This is the story of Ethan Caldwell, the billionaire who vanished without a trace. The disappearance of Ethan Caldwell quickly became more than the story of a missing billionaire. It became a puzzle that challenged experienced investigators, journalists, and private intelligence firms across the world. As the days turned into weeks, 3 questions refused to go away. The first was the simplest, yet the hardest to answer. Where did Ethan Caldwell actually disappear? His private jet never completed its scheduled journey. His passport was left behind, and there was no confirmed sighting after that final flight. The second question focused on money. Ethan controlled a business empire worth billions of dollars, and his absence shifted power overnight. Company shares fluctuated, long-delayed boardroom decisions suddenly moved forward, and several people found themselves in positions they could never have reached while he was still around. The third question became even more disturbing. Why did nearly everyone closest to Ethan begin changing their stories? Small inconsistencies soon became major contradictions, and each interview raised more questions than answers. Investigators soon realized that understanding Ethan's life meant examining the people closest to him. His wife, Claire Caldwell, insisted their marriage had never been stronger, yet friends quietly remembered months of tension behind the closed doors of their luxury estate. Their son, Mason Caldwell, claimed he had spoken with his father only briefly before the disappearance, while his younger sister, Olivia Caldwell, admitted she had received an unusual message from Ethan just hours earlier, but refused to explain its meaning. Ethan's longtime business partners described him as confident and focused, although confidential emails later suggested growing disagreements over a deal that could reshape the company's future. His private security chief, Daniel Brooks, maintained that every security protocol had been followed perfectly, but missing surveillance footage left investigators questioning his account. Ethan's trusted attorney, Rebecca Hayes, remained unusually guarded whenever discussions turned to recently updated legal documents. Then there was another name that appeared unexpectedly in the investigation: Victoria Lane. No family member had mentioned her before, yet records suggested she had met Ethan several times in complete secrecy during the weeks leading up to his disappearance. By the time detectives connected these pieces together, one conclusion became impossible to ignore. Every one of them had something to hide. To understand why Ethan Caldwell disappeared, investigators believed they first had to understand the man himself. 30 years before his name appeared on magazine covers and financial news networks, Ethan was just another ambitious young American growing up in a modest neighborhood where success was measured by hard work rather than wealth. His father worked long hours to provide for the family, while his mother constantly reminded him that opportunities were earned, never given. Ethan absorbed those lessons early. Friends remembered him as someone who refused to accept limits, often staying awake late into the night reading business books borrowed from the local library. After college, he launched his first small technology company from a cramped office with only a handful of employees and a dream that many dismissed as impossible. Failure came more than once, but each setback only strengthened his determination. Over the next 3 decades, Ethan made a series of bold investments, acquired struggling companies that others had abandoned, and transformed them into profitable businesses. Some admired his fearless vision, while others believed he was willing to make decisions that left little room for emotion when billions of dollars were at stake. Whether he was respected or feared depended entirely on whom you asked, but no one questioned the results. Ethan Caldwell had built one of the largest business empires in America through relentless ambition, calculated risks, and an unwavering belief that success belonged to those willing to make difficult choices. As his fortune grew, so did the extraordinary life that surrounded him. Ethan owned breathtaking homes overlooking the ocean, escaped to private islands far from public attention, entertained influential guests aboard magnificent mega-yachts, and attended exclusive gatherings where politicians, celebrities, and business leaders competed for an invitation. From the outside, it looked like the perfect life, the kind most people could only imagine. Yet those closest to him slowly began noticing changes that money could not explain. Ethan stopped lingering after meetings and insisted on leaving through different exits each time. He frequently glanced over his shoulder during public events, as though expecting to recognize someone hidden in the crowd. He doubled the size of his personal security team and instructed Daniel Brooks to revise protection plans almost every week. Public appearances that had been scheduled months in advance were suddenly canceled without explanation. Even more unusual, Ethan abandoned encrypted emails for certain conversations and began writing important messages by hand, sealing them inside envelopes that he personally delivered to trusted recipients. When questioned about the change, he simply smiled and changed the subject. It was as if he believed someone was reading every digital conversation before it reached its destination. Friends assumed the pressure of managing a global empire had made him unusually cautious, but investigators would later wonder whether Ethan had already discovered something he was never supposed to know. Then they uncovered one final detail. Just weeks before he vanished without a trace, Ethan placed a single phone call from an unregistered number. The call lasted less than 4 minutes. No recording has ever been found, and to this day, nobody has publicly explained who was on the other end of the line. As investigators dug deeper into Ethan Caldwell's disappearance, they uncovered evidence that challenged everything the public believed about him. The billionaire who appeared on magazine covers, addressed shareholders, and attended high-profile charity events was only one side of the story. Behind the carefully managed public image existed another life that almost nobody knew about. Financial analysts reviewing his records discovered a network of bank accounts that had never appeared on corporate disclosures or personal financial statements. The accounts were spread across multiple countries, funded through perfectly legal but remarkably complex transactions that concealed their true purpose. There were no obvious signs of fraud or tax evasion, yet the pattern suggested Ethan had been preparing for something long before he disappeared. Travel records revealed private flights booked under corporate subsidiaries with no clear business objective. Security logs showed meetings that never appeared on his official calendar, often taking place late at night in locations far from company headquarters. Investigators also recovered several encrypted phones from secure storage inside one of Ethan's offices. Each device contained only fragments of information, as though someone had deliberately erased the conversations while leaving just enough behind to suggest there was much more that remained hidden. Then came another discovery that raised even more questions. Ethan had occasionally used different identities while traveling, not to escape the law, but seemingly to avoid being recognized. The names led nowhere, each carefully constructed with supporting documents that appeared genuine at first glance, but revealed almost nothing about who had created them. The deeper detectives looked. The more they realized Ethan's hidden world stretched far beyond confidential business negotiations. Anonymous companies linked to his financial advisors quietly owned several luxury properties across the United States and overseas, none bearing Ethan's name in public records. Some houses appeared untouched for years, while others showed recent signs of occupation despite neighbors insisting they had never seen anyone arrive. One property contained little more than basic furniture, a locked safe, handwritten notes, and a map marked with locations investigators could not immediately explain. Claire Caldwell insisted she had never heard of these homes and denied knowing anything about the hidden accounts or the additional phones. Mason Caldwell expressed equal surprise, while Olivia Caldwell admitted only that her father had become increasingly private during the final year before he vanished. Daniel Brooks maintained that every trip Ethan made had a legitimate security purpose, but his explanations often conflicted with flight records collected by investigators. Rebecca Hayes refused to discuss confidential legal matters, citing attorney-client privilege whenever questions turned toward Ethan's private affairs. Even Victoria Lane, whose quiet meetings with Ethan had already attracted attention, denied knowing why he needed such extraordinary secrecy. Whether each of them was telling the truth remained impossible to prove. Then investigators obtained surveillance footage from a downtown office building recorded just 48 hours before Ethan disappeared. The video clearly showed Ethan Caldwell walking through the front entrance alone. Detectives reviewed every available camera from every exit in the building. They watched the recordings again and again. Somehow, despite entering in full view of multiple cameras, Ethan Caldwell never appeared leaving the building at all. The final 24 hours of Ethan Caldwell's known movements would become one of the most closely examined timelines in modern investigative history. Every minute was reconstructed using witness interviews, security records, digital data, and handwritten notes recovered after his disappearance. Shortly after 7 o'clock that morning, Ethan arrived at a quiet restaurant on the outskirts of the city for a private breakfast meeting. The reservation had been made only hours earlier under a different name, yet staff later confirmed it was unquestionably Ethan. The identity of the person sitting across from him has never been publicly established because the individual arrived before sunrise and left through a separate entrance before anyone realized the significance of the meeting. Employees remembered the conversation beginning calmly before voices became noticeably louder. Several witnesses recalled Ethan standing, placing both hands on the table, and speaking with unusual intensity before walking away without finishing his breakfast. Whatever was said during those final moments appeared to follow him throughout the rest of the day. At 9 o'clock, he canceled a highly anticipated meeting with international investors without offering an explanation. His office informed attendees that an urgent matter required his immediate attention, but no further details were provided. For a man known for honoring every commitment, the sudden cancellation surprised nearly everyone who worked with him. As the afternoon unfolded, Ethan's routine became increasingly difficult to explain. Telephone records showed a series of short incoming calls from numbers that investigators could never identify, each lasting less than 2 minutes before abruptly ending. None of the numbers were registered to individuals or businesses, and attempts to trace them produced nothing of value. Around the same time, security cameras surrounding one of Ethan's corporate offices unexpectedly stopped recording for just over 11 minutes. Technicians later found no evidence of equipment failure, software corruption, or power interruption. The missing footage has never been recovered. Ethan's longtime driver later described him as unusually quiet during their final journey together. Instead of reviewing documents or making business calls, Ethan spent much of the drive looking through the rear window, as though searching for a vehicle he believed was following them. Several times, he asked the driver to change direction without warning, taking unfamiliar routes through side streets before finally instructing him to stop outside a building where Ethan insisted he would continue alone. His executive assistant, who had worked beside him for nearly a decade, expected another routine update that evening. Instead, her phone lit up with a message sent directly from Ethan's private device. It contained only 2 words. "I'm sorry," she replied immediately, but no response ever came. Within minutes, every known line of communication connected to Ethan Caldwell went silent. His convoy disappeared from every confirmed location, and despite one of the largest searches ever launched for a private citizen, there was no confirmed trace of where he had gone. Investigators believed they had reached another dead end until traffic analysts reviewing highway surveillance noticed something almost everyone else had missed. Another dark-colored vehicle had been traveling behind Ethan's convoy for hours, keeping its distance with remarkable precision. Whoever was inside never attempted to pass him, never pulled alongside him, and never appeared on any official list of vehicles connected to the investigation. Someone else had been following Ethan Caldwell during the final hours before he vanished. By sunrise the next morning, Ethan Caldwell's disappearance was no longer a private crisis. It had become international breaking news. Television networks interrupted their regular programming, financial reporters abandoned market coverage, and news alerts reached millions of phones within minutes. The headline was almost impossible to believe. One of America's most influential billionaires had disappeared without leaving behind a single confirmed clue. Outside Caldwell Global headquarters, reporters crowded every entrance while employees arrived to find camera crews waiting for answers nobody could give. Claire Caldwell appeared briefly with her children, Mason Caldwell and Olivia Caldwell, asking for privacy and pleading with anyone who knew something to come forward. Daniel Brooks stood nearby, carefully watching the growing crowd, while Rebecca Hayes declined every request for an interview. Investors reacted almost immediately. Trading became increasingly volatile as uncertainty spread through financial markets. Within hours, the value of Ethan's company dropped sharply, wiping out billions of dollars in market value as shareholders questioned who would now lead the business empire he had spent decades building. Board members held emergency meetings behind closed doors, major projects were suspended, and competitors quietly prepared to capitalize on the uncertainty. What had begun as the disappearance of one man was quickly becoming an event capable of affecting businesses, employees, and economies far beyond the United States. The investigation expanded just as rapidly. Federal authorities joined local detectives, international law enforcement agencies shared intelligence, and private investigators hired by Ethan's company began following leads across multiple countries. A reward for information grew from hundreds of thousands of dollars into several million as business leaders, family members, and anonymous donors contributed to the search. Every day brought thousands of tips, yet almost all of them ended in disappointment. Meanwhile, the internet transformed into a battlefield of competing theories. Some believed Ethan had been kidnapped by an organized criminal network demanding a ransom that had somehow remained secret. Others argued he had uncovered corporate espionage involving powerful competitors determined to silence him before a major business deal could be exposed. Another group insisted political figures feared what Ethan knew about confidential international agreements. Some suspected an inside job carried out by someone within his own trusted circle, while others claimed Ethan had staged his disappearance to escape responsibilities no amount of money could solve. As the weeks passed, the speculation became increasingly extraordinary, with a surprising number of people even suggesting he had been taken by forces beyond human understanding. Every theory found believers because no explanation seemed impossible anymore. Yet while the world argued over elaborate possibilities, detectives quietly ignored the headlines and concentrated on something almost laughably ordinary. During a routine review of Ethan Caldwell's financial activity, they discovered a faded receipt worth exactly $12. At first glance, it appeared completely insignificant. Before long, investigators would realize it might be one of the most important pieces of evidence in the entire case. The $12 receipt became the starting point for a new phase of the investigation. Detectives returned to the beginning and rebuilt Ethan Caldwell's final days minute by minute, refusing to accept even the smallest detail without verification. Every phone call, vehicle movement, financial transaction, and security log was placed onto a single timeline that stretched across an entire investigation room. Claire Caldwell was interviewed repeatedly, and although she remained consistent on many points, investigators noticed subtle differences each time she described Ethan's final week. Mason Caldwell insisted his father had been focused on expanding the business, while Olivia Caldwell recalled conversations suggesting Ethan was considering stepping away from public life altogether. Daniel Brooks carefully explained every security decision made during the last month before Ethan disappeared, but several officers questioned why protection procedures had changed so frequently. Rebecca Hayes confirmed that Ethan had recently updated important legal documents, but declined to discuss their contents, citing attorney-client confidentiality. Employees throughout Caldwell Global described an atmosphere that had quietly shifted in the weeks leading up to Ethan's disappearance. Meetings were canceled without warning, sensitive projects were suddenly restricted to a handful of executives, and Ethan appeared to trust fewer people with each passing day. Individually, none of these details proved anything. Together, they suggested that Ethan believed a serious threat was much closer than anyone had imagined. Financial investigators then turned their attention to Ethan's records, expecting to uncover a trail that explained his hidden movements. Instead, they found gaps. Entire chains of private emails had vanished from secure company servers, despite backup systems that should have preserved every message. Several encrypted hard drives recovered from Ethan's offices had been professionally wiped, leaving behind almost no recoverable data. Digital forensic specialists concluded that whoever erased the information possessed advanced technical knowledge and understood exactly what investigators would search for first. The timing raised even more questions. Some files appeared to have been deleted only hours after Ethan was last seen. At the same time, witnesses who had initially provided detailed statements unexpectedly began changing their accounts. A restaurant employee who once confidently described Ethan's breakfast meeting could no longer remember the face of the person sitting across from him. A maintenance contractor revised the timeline surrounding the unexplained security camera failure. Even a driver who had claimed to see a suspicious vehicle admitted he was no longer certain. Whether fear, confusion, or outside pressure caused these changes remained impossible to determine. Then another unexpected development shook the investigation. A senior Caldwell Global executive who had worked alongside Ethan for nearly 20 years submitted his resignation overnight and left the country before detectives could arrange another interview. The decision immediately attracted attention, but an even more surprising lead emerged days later. During a follow-up visit to one of Ethan's office buildings, an elderly security guard quietly asked detectives if they were still searching for the missing billionaire. He explained that he had remembered seeing someone enter the building shortly before Ethan arrived, someone whose presence made no sense at all. It was a face he recognized instantly, a person who should never have been there under any circumstances. As investigators verified the guard's account and compared it with the growing collection of evidence, the direction of the case changed dramatically. For the first time, detectives began considering a possibility they had previously struggled to accept. The investigation was no longer pointing towards strangers, competitors, or unknown enemies. It was beginning to point toward Ethan Caldwell's own family. The investigation entered its most difficult stage when detectives stopped asking who might have harmed Ethan Caldwell and instead asked who had both the opportunity and the reason to hide the truth. Every person closest to him became the subject of intense scrutiny. Claire Caldwell was the first to face renewed attention. Publicly, she appeared determined to help investigators, standing before cameras with quiet confidence and urging anyone with information to come forward. Privately, detectives discovered that she had met with Rebecca Hayes just days before Ethan disappeared to review documents related to the family's estate. Claire insisted the meeting involved routine financial planning, yet phone records revealed several calls between her and Ethan that neither of them had mentioned during earlier interviews. Investigators found no direct evidence linking her to the disappearance, but they struggled to explain why certain details had been omitted. Mason Caldwell soon found himself under similar examination. As Ethan's only son, he stood to inherit significant influence within Caldwell Global if his father never returned. Mason denied any interest in taking control before his time, but investigators learned he and Ethan had argued repeatedly over the future direction of the company. Several executives described heated disagreements behind closed doors, while Mason maintained that every family business experienced occasional conflict. Olivia Caldwell presented an entirely different picture. She appeared genuinely devastated by her father's disappearance and willingly answered every question placed before her. Yet detectives could not ignore the unusual message Ethan had sent her shortly before he vanished, or the fact that she refused to explain its meaning. Each member of the Caldwell family seemed to be protecting something, though investigators could not determine whether those secrets were connected to Ethan's disappearance or simply private matters they feared would become public. Attention then shifted beyond the family and toward the people entrusted with protecting Ethan's empire. Detectives carefully examined Ethan's closest business partners, uncovering disagreements over a confidential transaction that promised extraordinary profits but carried equally extraordinary risks. Minutes from internal meetings revealed sharp divisions among senior executives, and one proposal had been delayed only because Ethan personally refused to approve it. Rebecca Hayes remained another central figure. She acknowledged preparing revised legal documents for Ethan, but continued declining to discuss their contents, arguing that confidentiality did not disappear simply because her client had vanished. Investigators respected the law but questioned whether those documents contained instructions someone desperately wanted to keep hidden. Daniel Brooks, Ethan's trusted head of security, also faced increasing pressure. Surveillance failures, altered travel routes, and unexplained changes to security procedures all occurred under his supervision. Brooks insisted every decision had been made at Ethan's direct request, yet investigators could not verify many of those conversations because the relevant communications had disappeared. Then there was Victoria Lane, the mysterious woman whose name had surfaced repeatedly throughout the investigation. She denied any romantic relationship with Ethan and claimed their meetings concerned a confidential project she could not discuss. Detectives found no evidence disproving her statement, but neither could they explain why Ethan had concealed those meetings from everyone else in his life. One by one, every revelation appeared to bring investigators closer to solving the mystery, only for another contradiction to emerge moments later. Every answer produced a new question. Every suspect had a believable motive, a realistic opportunity, carefully guarded secrets, and explanations that never fully aligned with the evidence. The closer detectives believed they were to uncovering the truth about Ethan Caldwell's disappearance, the further that truth seemed to move beyond their reach. Just when the investigation appeared to be running out of meaningful leads, an overlooked detail from Ethan Caldwell's financial records redirected detectives toward a storage facility on the edge of the city. The monthly rental fee had been quietly paid through one of the same accounts connected to Ethan's hidden network of transactions, yet the unit itself had never appeared in previous searches because it was registered through a company that seemed unrelated to him. Armed with a court order, investigators unlocked the door expecting little more than old business files or forgotten personal belongings. Instead, they found a carefully organized collection of items that suggested Ethan had been preparing for something long before he disappeared. Shelves were lined with sealed containers, each labeled in Ethan's distinctive handwriting. Inside were hundreds of photographs showing meetings with people investigators had never identified, along with images of buildings, vehicles, and locations spread across different cities and countries. Several envelopes contained large amounts of cash in multiple currencies, enough to finance extensive travel without attracting attention. Nearby sat 2 passports bearing Ethan's photograph, but issued under different identities, reinforcing the growing belief that his secret life had been far more complex than anyone imagined. Detectives also recovered several encrypted storage drives protected by sophisticated security measures that digital forensic specialists admitted would take months to access. Every discovery raised fresh questions, yet the most extraordinary item remained untouched inside a plain cardboard box resting quietly on the highest shelf. Inside that box lay a single leather-bound journal. Unlike the encrypted devices surrounding it, the journal required no password, only the willingness to read words Ethan had written in his own hand. Many pages contained fragmented thoughts, observations about meetings, reminders, and references to names investigators had never encountered before. Some entries appeared deliberately vague, almost as though Ethan expected someone else might eventually read them. Then detectives reached a page unlike any other. It contained only one handwritten sentence, centered neatly on otherwise empty paper. "If you're reading this, they finally found me." The room fell silent as investigators considered what those words might mean. There was no explanation of who they were, no date, no additional context, and no clue indicating whether Ethan believed he was writing about competitors, criminals, trusted associates, or someone else entirely. Every theory that had dominated the investigation suddenly seemed possible again. Had Ethan been running from a powerful organization, someone within his own inner circle, or a threat he believed could never be exposed? Detectives searched every remaining page, hoping the journal would provide the answer, but the identity of "they" was never revealed. Instead, Ethan's final written message transformed the entire investigation from a search for one missing billionaire into the pursuit of an invisible group that nobody could identify and whose existence nobody could even prove. Years have passed since Ethan Caldwell walked into history and seemingly disappeared without leaving a single confirmed answer behind. Investigators closed some files, opened new ones, and followed countless leads that ultimately reached the same destination: uncertainty. Claire Caldwell, Mason Caldwell, Olivia Caldwell, Daniel Brooks, Rebecca Hayes, and Victoria Lane all continued with their lives, but each remained permanently connected to one of America's most enduring mysteries. Some investigators believe Ethan carefully planned his own disappearance long before anyone realized he was preparing to leave. Others remain convinced that someone intercepted him before he could expose information powerful enough to threaten people with unimaginable influence. The hidden accounts, the anonymous properties, the encrypted devices, the missing surveillance footage, the $12 receipt, and the handwritten journal all became pieces of a puzzle that has never been fully assembled. Every discovery answered one question only to create another, reminding everyone involved that the truth is not always buried because it cannot be found. Sometimes it is buried because someone has worked tirelessly to keep it that way. Ethan Caldwell may have vanished, but the questions he left behind continue to challenge everyone who studies the case. This story reminds us that wealth can open doors, create opportunities, and place extraordinary influence in the hands of a single person. Power can build protection, command loyalty, and shape the decisions of those around us. Yet neither money nor influence can guarantee safety when secrets become more valuable than fortunes themselves. Perhaps the greatest mystery was never how Ethan Caldwell disappeared. Perhaps the greater mystery is why the complete truth disappeared with him and whether it will ever be uncovered. If you had billions of dollars and discovered a secret powerful enough to shake the highest levels of power, what would you do? Would you expose it knowing everything you had built could disappear overnight, or would you protect yourself and those you love? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so share your theory in the comments below. What do you think really happened to Ethan Caldwell? Was this an elaborate escape, or did someone ensure he was never found? If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. And if you think Ethan Caldwell's disappearance was unbelievable, wait until you hear our next story about the billionaire who returned decades later with a secret that changed everything.